How we doing, everybody? Welcome back to another episode of Wisconsin Sports on the Go with Trage. I am your host, Trage. Today, on this fine Tuesday, we are talking mainly Brewers today. We're going to get into the Cardinals series here, talk about Game 1 coming up tonight here, 6:40 start from American Family Field. The Brewers with a chance to clinch the postseason. Well, they already clinched it, but a chance to win the division title. And then we're also going to be talking about some possibilities for roster moves heading towards the playoffs. Also, jumping into a topic that I wanted to cover, and that was a year by year look at this Brewers team, how we've done in the playoffs in the past, comparing this year's team to some years past, going all the way back to that 1981 Brewers team. So we're going to compare season by season there. We're going to jump right into it. That's what we're going to do. We're going to get right into the Cardinals series first, though, and we're going to be looking tonight's game, 6:40 start. Adrian Hauser will toe the rubber for the Brewers in this one. 7-4 with a 4.35 ERA. Cardinal killer is what I like to call Adrian Hauser. Hopefully he does not prove me wrong here. Knock on some wood there. And going up against Thompson, left-handed pitcher for the Cardinals, 5-7 with a 4.57 ERA. Nothing more the Cardinals want to do than prolong the Brewers for winning the division title. So the Brewers, they have to be on their A game in this one. Looking at the Brewers against Thompson, Adames is hitting 250 against him so far in his career. Contreras is hitting 667. Donaldson, a 500 hitter against him, 1 home run and 3 RBIs. Blake Perkins, a 500 hitter there in 2 at-bats. And Tyrone Taylor in 4 at-bats has actually got a home run and an RBI against him too. Yelich, 3 at-bats. He's batting .333 against Thompson. Looking at the Cardinals against Adrian Hauser. And this is what I'm talking about here. You look down the Cardinals lineup, and besides some fresh faces in there, a guy like Paul Goldschmidt, 31 at-bats, 3 home runs, 12 RBIs, a .290 average. Goldschmidt's been hitting pretty good against him. But you look down this order, and most guys on this Cardinals team in years past have struggled against Adrian Hauser in that sinker. For some reason, Adrian Hauser has pitched good against this Cardinals team. Looking down the order for the Cardinals, Baker, he's in 2 at-bats. He's got nothing against Hauser to show for it. Edman in 17 at-bats. He's .235 hitter. Looking down there, looks like that's about it for this Cardinals team for decent averages against him. 300 hitter Nootbaar is against Adrian Hauser. But other than that, not seeing much there for this Cardinals team against Hauser. So Hauser has stacked up well against this Cardinals lineup in the past. Reminder, 6:40 start tonight for the Brewers. Hopefully to see them clinch and the division title tonight. Coming into this one, 88-68. The Cardinals coming in with the exact opposite record, 68-88 on the season there. Cubbies have a game tonight too. They open up a set with the Atlanta Braves. So hopefully the Braves can help out the Brewers and get the Cubs out of the division race and maybe even knock them out of that playoff race. Looking at what the standings look like right now in the wild card for the Cubs as of right now, the Phillies are 5 games up in the wild card. The Cubs are tied with the Arizona Diamondbacks for that second spot, with the Marlins and the Cincinnati Reds hanging around there. The Marlins 1 game back, and the Cincinnati Reds hanging around at 2.5 games back of them so far. Looking at the roster moves that I was thinking for the Brewers to make heading towards the playoffs here, there's a couple of them. I was reading through a lot of different people's opinions on it, and I kind of like some of the moves that I saw, the potential moves that we could see here. Number one being Garrett Mitchell coming back up to this Brewers team. I really do think Mitchell could have a viable role for the Brewers there off the bench, in the field, potentially in a pinch hitter role, or if he gets up there, maybe we'll see him back in Milwaukee tonight for this Brewers team, and maybe he's a spark plug in there. Maybe we get him in the lineup, he starts hitting at the major league level again, and he solidifies himself back out there in the outfield. It's going to be tough. Tyrone Taylor has had a good September. Cross my fingers, knock on wood on that one. He's been having better at-bats. Sal Frelick, on-base machine. Christian Yelich just coming back. Maybe you put Yelich into that DH role and allow Garrett Mitchell to take one of those outfield spots away from, say, Tyrone Taylor, and then put Canna in the opposite spot. Or you could mix it around. Maybe Canna can play the infield for you. there's a lot of possibilities that I could see with this one, but it all depends on how Garrett Mitchell comes back and what he looks like. Another move, I did see somebody talking about Tyler Black coming up to the major league roster. You know, it what better time? What better time for a guy to come up? Tyler Black has, I mean, done nothing but hit at each level he's gone to in the major or in the minor league so far. 284 hitter at AAA. You can't really put anything against this guy. He's just an on-base machine. 25 doubles, 12 triples, 18 home runs, 55 stolen bases. He is that guy in AAA and in AA this year for the Brewers minor league system. So maybe see a guy like Tyler Black come up and possibly replace Brian Anderson there on the bench. I did see another guy talking Robert Gasser coming up in the potentially for a bullpen role. I could see it because the guy that you would look to replace, left-handed pitcher Robert Gasser for left-handed pitcher Andrew Chafin, the role of Andrew Chafin right now is low leverage. The game is out of hand. The Brewers are either up by a lot or losing by a lot. Andrew Chafin comes into that one and still manages to somehow blow those blowouts. I mean, we could have put him in that 16-1 game. If we left him in there for 2 innings, he probably would have let them come back and make it a 16-10 game. But luckily, didn't do that. But looking at that, Robert Gasser could fill that same role and potentially give you a live arm out there in the bullpen that could potentially fill a greater role out there for this Brewers team down the stretch. Another left-handed pitcher, a little bit more velocity on him than Hobie Milner, but another lefty to complement him down there in that bullpen. Those are a couple of the roster moves that I was looking around seeing, and I agree. Those are some good roster moves that the Brewers could make to potentially put themselves in a better position come playoff time. I would also, if not Tyler Black, I would love to see Owen Miller come back up to this Brewers team. I think he has a ton of potential to help out this Brewers team in the playoffs, especially in a pinch hit role. He's a contact bat. He puts the bat on the ball, and that's what you're looking for. Bring him up, designate Brian Anderson. Maybe you don't rush Tyler Black up to the majors. Maybe you just stick with a guy like Owen Miller or even a guy like Abraham Toro coming back up to the big league club. You have a slew of outfielders in there, but not a lot of infielders with that big of an upside right now. Maybe one of those two guys could be a possible answer for you in the playoffs. But with that, I want to jump into my main topic of today, and that was I wanted to talk about years past Brewer playoff teams and how they have fared in the playoffs. So looking back, all the way back, 1981, the Milwaukee Brewers, then a part of the AL East, they lost in the ALDS 3-2 in that season. They lost to the New York Yankees. The first half of the season started out 31-25, finished third. In that second half of the season, they were 31-22, finished first, and they lost in that AL Division Series 3-2 to the New York Yankees. That year, manager Buck Rogers was in charge, 62-47 overall in that season. Looking at the team batting on that season there, just to cover, I just want to look at the stats there and just see how they compare leading up to our 2023 season. So we look at catcher-wise first. Ted Simmons on this team, 216 batting average, 32 strikeouts on the season, 61 RBIs, and 14 home runs in 380 at-bats. Ted Simmons, decent. He was decent behind the plate and didn't really bring the bat to the party, as you would say, but he anchored it behind the plate there for the Brewers that season. Cecil Cooper, 320 hitter on that season, 30 strikeouts, 60 RBIs, 12 home runs, 133 hits for Cecil. Looking down this lineup here, this is where you get to the big dogs. Jim Gantner, he had a 267 average on that season, 33 RBIs, 2 home runs, and 35 runs scored, 94 hits in total. Robin Yount sitting there at the shortstop spot, 273 hitter on that season, 49 RBIs, 10 home runs, 103 hits. Looking down here a little bit further, Gorman Thomas, he was a 259 hitter on that season, 94 hits, 22 doubles, 64 RBIs on the season there. So this team was across the board mid 200 hitters. They jumped up a little bit when you get into guys like Yount, Gantner, and Cecil Cooper. But looking down the line here, it was mid 200 hitters. They weren't below 200, but they were hovering right around it there. Looking down a little bit here, Paul Molitor on that team also. 267 hitter in 251 at bats for him. He was outshined by other center fielder there on that season, Gorman Thomas, who was ahead of him there. In that season, Paul Molitor actually only played 64 games, 19 RBIs, 2 home runs, 67 hits in total, like I said. Looking down there, Ned Yost on that team also. At 26 years old, 30 plate appearances in that season, 27 at bats, 6 hits, 3 walks, and 6 strikeouts. Not a good year for Ned Yost. But looking at that team batting average on that season, they were sitting at a 257, within the 14 AL teams. They were ranked at 6 in team batting average that season. That was a team that went to the playoffs there. Now, looking at the pitching on that team, Vukovic was the main guy in that starting rotation there. 3.55 ERA for him, 149 innings pitched, 84 strikeouts for Vukovic. Looking down there, Mike Caldwell, 3.93 ERA, 144 innings pitched, and 41 strikeouts. In that bullpen, you had Raleigh Fingers in there. Jerry Augustine was out there. Raleigh on the season, 1.04 ERA for him, 78 innings. He had 61 strikeouts, 28 saves on the season there. And then looking at Jerry Augustine, 4.26 ERA, 27 games pitched, 61 innings, and 26 strikeouts. So the bullpen wasn't as dominant as what you're used to seeing today, if you put those numbers into perspective. Because you look at this bullpen for the Brewers in that season, there was a lot of ERAs that were up in the 3s, 5s, 4s, a lot of high 3s. Your best ERA was coming out of Raleigh Fingers there at 1.04 on the season. And he was your closer, so you expect a little bit better out of him. But you look down and you look at like the day to today. You look at like pitchers today in the bullpen, and you'll see a lot lower of ERAs. We could compare it to, let's just say, 2023. You look at a Brewers bullpen here, and you see ERAs, what you're sitting around like Devin Williams, 1.59. Bryce Wilson, 2.68. Howie Milner, 1.87. So you look at the bullpens of the past and today, and you just see that giant jump there of ERAs when you go back a ways, when the pitching wasn't as dominant as what it is today with the higher velocities and more break. I mean, you're getting a lot newer pitches and more break on the ball, and that has changed what the landscape is for pitchers today. But jumping back into that 1981 team, looking at the team ERA for the Brewers in that season, they were actually ranked 12th out of the 14 AL teams there with 3.91 ERA on the season there. So looking at that, you look at how much it has changed. The Brewers lineup in that season was ranked towards the top of the AL there. You look at the team batting average, they were ranked at the 6th spot. They were up towards the top hitting wise, but they were at the bottom looking at their pitching in that season. We will jump right away into 1982. Brewers finished first in the AL East in that season. Postseason, won the AL Championship Series over the California Angels, 3-2, and then lost to the pesky Cardinals. They've been getting us ever since 1982. Lost in 1982 in the World Series, 4-3 in that one. Buck Rogers actually started the season as the Brewers manager that year. 23-24. He went before Harvey. He took over the wall bangers there, and the rest is history. He took them and made it a 72-43-1. Can't forget about the one season that year. Looking down the list here, just to check out in that season for the Brewers, this is where the averages took a jump for this Brewers team. You look at Ted Simmons in that season, comparing him back to 1981. Ted Simmons was sitting at a 216 average, and you jump into 1982, that average jumps up to 269 one season later. 97 RBIs, 23 home runs, 145 hits in 539 at-bats. Looking at Cecil Cooper, he continued to rake. 313 average for Cecil in that season, 121 RBIs, and look at the home run jump from 1981. He had 12 home runs, jumped in 1982, sitting at 32 home runs, 121 RBIs, 205 hits, and 654 at bats. He was an on base machine. People talk about today, you look at Freddie Freeman, you look at guys like Paul Goldschmidt when he was raking for the Diamondbacks, then to the Cardinals. Cecil Cooper was that dude before that. He was the star in Major League Baseball at first base before any of those guys were a thought. Looking down the lineup here, second base, Jim Gantner, 295 average for Gantner in that season. Robin Yount, 331. Paul Molitor sitting at that 302 average. Charlie Moore, 254. Gorman Thomas was sitting at a 245 average. Ben Ogilvy was sitting at a 244 average. So you look at the jump from 1981 to 1982 and how much further the Brewers went in that playoffs. They went all the way to the World Series in that season. But you look at the jump in batting average for the Spurs team. You even look at the bench there and Don Mooney, who went 284 on the season, 78 hits, and in 275 at-bats for him. Even a guy like Roy Howell was a 260 hitter in that season. So that's just the jump of the Brewers there from year to year, team batting there, because you look at their rank batting average-wise, they were sixth in 1981, 1982, they actually jumped up to second in all of AL teams there with a 279 team batting average on that season. The team was raking. You look at their ranks home run wise, 216, they were ranked first in the AL, runs scored first, team hits second, doubles second, they're fifth in triples. We didn't like triples. We were on double machines or we were knocking it over the wall. We were Harvey's wall bangers in that season. That's where they got the nickname there. Because you look at team home runs, 216, that's crazy. And number one in the AL in that season. Looking at pitching for the Brewers that year, again, pitching was though it's weird to look at pitching from the past compared to today because these ERAs wouldn't even fly in today's MLB. But in the past, this is what you had. You look at guys like Mike Caldwell in that season, a 3.91 ERA, 17 and 13 record for him, 34 starts. He had 112 earned runs on that season, 30 home runs given up. Pete Vukovich in that season, 18 and 6 overall. He had a 30 games started, a 3.34 ERA on the season. And then the ERAs after that go down. But then looking at your bullpen there, guys like Rowley, he took a little jump in the ERA, a 2.60 in this next season here. Team ERA for the Brewers in that season was 3.98. They were actually ranked sixth in the AL teams in that ranking. They were actually ranked first in saves, though. They had 47 saves on the season there. Yep, 47 saves. All they resulted from Moose Haas actually recorded a save in that season. Then Raleigh had 29 in that season, though. But you look at the difference there of the Brewers hitting year by year, 1981 to 1982. And a lot of it had to do with, you look at like Paul Molitor coming into more of a role there at third base for this Brewers team. And then new additions in that lineup, but also the jump of Ted Simmons from 1981 to 1982. Just the difference between the guys 1981 to 1982, that really solidified this team. And I mean, Robin Yount, the kid, you can't really knock that 331 batting average for Robin Yount in that season. 114 RBIs and 29 home runs. That's a shortstop right there. That's a real shortstop. Not the one we're living with right now, that guy. If we can get him back, that'd be A-okay with me. But you look at that team, and that team was solid hitting. Pitching was solid for the era that they were in. And that team took it all the way to the World Series. Sadly, lost the one World Series we've been to in 1982. They're 4-3, and it had to be to the damn Cardinals. Sorry about that. Didn't mean to swear, but it just, they get me every time. And then the Brewers, after that 1982, they do not factor into the race all the way up until 2008, when the Brewers decided, hey, we decided this year we want to make the playoffs. Lost in the division series to the Phillies. In that season, managers were Ned Yost. He was a 83 and 67 overall, and Dale Sven was sitting at a 7-5 record on that season. Doug Melvin was actually the general manager in that season for the Brewers. They finished with a record of 90 and 72, actually finished second in the NL Central in that season. Looking down at the lineup for the Brewers, Jason Kendall was the catcher for the Brewers, the everyday catcher for the Brewers, really, in that season. He was sitting at a 246 average. Just looking at the drop in the averages from what the Brewers had in 1982 versus what they have now in this season of 2008. Jason Kendall, 246. Prince Fielder, 276 average, 34 home runs on the season, 102 RBIs. Then you had guys like Ricky Weeks, 234 average. J.J. Hardy, 283. J.J. Hardy had a breakout year that season. Bill Hall, 225. I always hoped Bill Hall would become more than what he was. He was a nice guy. He was a cool guy. Nice guy to be, to have around the clubhouse. He was kind of like the Willie Adames of this team. Ryan Braun, that season, 285 hitter with 37 home runs and 106 RBIs. Mike Cameron, center fielder, another guy. Wish he would have turned out more than what he was. That's my Tyrone Taylor of the 2008 Brewers. Bill Hall is my Willie Adames. Mike Cameron is my Tyrone Taylor. And then looking at Corey Hart there to round it off there, 268 average for him. Craig Counsell was on the bench for this team, 226 hitter on that season. He wasn't there for his bat. He was there for that awesome arm and his glove. I'm just kidding. But this team, looking down at the bench for him, you look at guys like Alcides Escobar was on this team there, 2 for 4 on the season for Alcides Escobar, 500 hitter. Not much to speak of, though, otherwise on the bench there. Looking at the starting rotation for the Brewers in this one. First I want to look at team batting average. I just want to look at team batting average real quick. The Brewers ranked within 16 NL teams in that season. The Brewers ranked 12th with a 253 team batting average. Looking at the home run chase there, they were ranked 3rd with 198. So they were boppers. They had the home run ball. They were extra base hit machines. Looking at doubles wise, 324. They were ranked 2nd in all the NL. And then looking down the line here, that's where it starts to drop off for this team. Team batting average, team on base percentage, slugging, OPS. On base percentage, they were ranked 10th within 16 teams. Slugging percentage, 5th within the 16 teams. And our OPS, they were ranked 6th in these 16 teams for the season. But they were ranked 1st in hit by pitches. Prince Fielder took a lot of hits. I want to see, actually, who led the team in hit by pitches in that season? Ricky Weeks. Ricky Weeks led that team with 14 hit by pitches on the season. Followed by Prince Fielder and Jason Kendall. Jason Kendall with 13, Prince Fielder with 12. Holy crap, they like to get plunked. They had, that's just crazy. See how many guys were hit by a pitch. Any of the pitchers get plunked? Nope, none of the pitchers got plunked. But in that season, the big ad the Brewers had, CC Sabathia, came in for the Brewers. 17 starts for the Brewers. He had an 11-2 record, 1.65 ERA in 130 innings, and 128 strikeouts. He had almost half of Ben Sheets' starts in that season. Ben Sheets had 31 starts on that season. CC Sabathia was 17. And strikeout numbers, only 30 strikeouts less than Ben Sheets. That's just crazy to look at there. CC Sabathia was that dude for this Brewers team. But you look at the Brewers in that season, and you flip it over to the bullpen, and you see where the struggle started to come in for this team. Looking at the bullpen there, closing down games, Salomon Torres, he was sitting at a 3.49 ERA, 28 saves on the season there in 71 games pitched. Carlos Villanueva, 4.07 ERA. Eric Gagne, a 4.44 ERA for him in 50 games pitched. Giovanni Gallardo, he had 4 games pitched on that season, actually, sitting at a 1.88 ERA. Brewer lover and the Brewers fans love him. Tim Dillard actually pitched for the Brewers in that season. 13 games, a 4.40 ERA. He was another guy like Castanera. He was great in the minors. Couldn't do it in the majors. Looking at other guys you just look at this team and you look at the starting rotation for the Brewers even. Ben Sheets, Dave Bush, Jeff Suppan, Manny Parra, CC Sabathia. You look at the ERAs, you had Ben Sheets sitting at 3.09, but then you jump up into the fours, high fours there, looking at Jeff Suppan, almost a 5 ERA on the season there. So you look at the starting pitching for the Brewers, and they don't stack up well. Looking at what we're going to get into in the future Brewers, looking at like 2023, even back to the 2018 Brewers, just had more of a solid starting rotation. So the starting rotation in this one was what killed the Brewers. CC Sabathia couldn't pitch every day for this Brewers team. Looking at team totals in this for the pitching, they actually ranked second in all NL teams for team ERA, a 3.85. Looking at saves, they ranked third. Strikeouts, they ranked eighth on the season there during that one. The Brewers in that season, like I said, finished that year lost in the NLDS to the Philadelphia Phillies. We're going to jump into 2011 because everybody loves the 2011 Milwaukee Brewers. In this season, the Brewers actually made it to the championship series where another year of losing to them stinking Cardinals killed us. Won the NL Division Series over the Arizona Diamondbacks on a walk-off. Nyjer Morgan, 3-2, they won that series, then lost the NL Championship Series 4-2 to the St. Louis Cardinals. Looking at the manager, Ron Renneke on that season, 96 and 66 overall, finished first in the NL Central. Looking at the lineup there, we get into guys like Jonathan Lucroy was added to this team here. 265 hitter on that year. Prince Fielder, 299. Ricky Weeks, 269. Yuniesky Betancourt. I forgot about Betancourt. Can't forget about that behind-the-back glove flip he had there. 2 weeks for that double play. Yuniesky Betancourt with a 252 average on that season. This is where you compare the years. Yuniesky Betancourt, defensive shortstop, club morale guy, but he held a 252 average. Willy Adames, defense, club morale guy, doesn't hold the average. That's where the difference is that we're getting into with these Brewer teams. Casey McGee coming into this one. Gone without Casey McGee in this season. 223 hitter for the Brewers that year, 13 home runs, 67 RBIs. He was like our Rowdy Tellez. He was just kind of there, added the fire, added that little thump when you needed him. Ryan Braun in that year, 332 hitter. I love me some Ryan Braun. I don't care what people say. Drugs, no drugs. I don't care what you got to say. I love me some Ryan Braun. In that season, 187 hits overall, 109 runs scored for Brawny, 33 home runs, and 111 RBIs. Compare that to his counterpart, Prince Fielder, 38 home runs and 120 RBIs. They were those dudes there in the middle of the lineup for the Brewers. Nyjer Morgan on that season there, a 304 hitter. Nyjer Morgan, 37 RBIs, 4 home runs. He had 115 hits on the season. That's one that I forgot about. I forgot how well Nyjer Morgan hit for the Brewers that year. And then Corey Hart, too, 285 hitter for the Brewers that year, 63 RBIs and 26 home runs. This was a heck of a team. Besides taking Casey McGee out of that lineup, that 223 average, this lineup had them dudes in it. And this team had a lot of potential for them. Looking at the bench for them, Go Gomez on the bench for the Brewers that year. He had a 225 average, 8 home runs, 24 RBIs, scored that game-winning run there against the Diamondbacks. Looking down there, Craig Counsell had a front row seat for this run, a 178 hitter that year. Mark Kotsay was on this team's 270 hitter. George Kataris was also there, 252. They had a pretty good team put together in that 2011 year. Looking at the starting lineup for him, averages, besides Casey McGee, he had a 223. Other than that, all 250 and above. This was a solid lineup for the Brewers there in that season. Looking at their team average that season, they were actually ranked third at 261. They were sitting home run-wise. They were first in all of the league there, 185. Triples, they were eighth. Doubles, they were eighth. Hits, they were seventh. Looking at team RBIs on that season, they had 639 RBIs on that season. Hit by pitches went down there. They were ranked 6th that year. So they weren't getting plunked so much there. Actually, Nigel Morgan was hit 14 times. I don't know how Nigel Morgan gets hit so much. Looking at pitching for the Brewers in that year, another year where pitching kind of killed the Brewers. Looking at this starting rotation of Randy Wolf sitting at that 3.69 ERA, Yovani Gallardo 3.452 ERA, Sean Markham a 3.54 ERA, Zach Greinke coming in at a 3.83 ERA, and Chris Narveson a 4.45 ERA for the Brewers that season. The starting rotation was not as solid as what we're used to seeing these days from all major league teams, but looking at the Brewers compared to 2023. Looking at closing wise, this was where John Axford was shutting them down there with that handlebar mustache. 46 saves on the season there. 74 games, 109 or 195 ERA, 195 ERA for Axford in that one. Looking down at the rest of the bullpen for him there, Marco Estrada, Cameron Lee, you had a guy like Francisco Rodriguez setting up John Axford in this one. He had a 1.86 ERA in 31 games. Impressive stuff there to have a guy like Francisco Rodriguez setting up games for you. Looking at other guys who pitched for the Brewers in that year, Zach Braddock, he had a 3.27 ERA in 25 games. Takesha Soito, I cannot say that name. 30 games pitched for him, a 2.03 ERA. And then Sergio Mitre had a 3.27 ERA in 22 games. The bullpen wasn't as solid. Looking at team ERA in that season, they ranked 7th within all 16 teams there. And they were ranked, looking at saves-wise, they were 5th. John Axford actually had all but one save for the Brewers in that season there. The other save coming from Cameron Lee. Team strikeouts, they were ranked 5th with 1,257 on that season. We're going to jump all the way to the next year the Brewers make it, and that is 2018. The Brewers made it in with a 96-67 record, finished first in the NL Central. They won the division series against the Rockies 3-0, and then lost that heartbreaker series. This is where my hatred of the Dodgers comes from, Manny Machado. NL Championship Series lost 4-3 to the Dodgers in that year. Craig Counsell was the manager for the Brewers. Look at that. Jumping from 2011, where Craig Counsell was chilling on the bench there, to 2018, he is now leading the charge for the Brewers there. David Stearns, general manager, this was a start, and this was the moves that David Stearns made in that season, getting guys like Christian Yelich and Lorenzo Cain into that lineup. Looking at the Brewers in that year, this is where the averages start to dip for me. Looking at guys like Manny Pena, 252 average on the season. Jesus Aguilar was a 274 hitter. Jonathan Villar coming in at 261. Orlando Arcia, the playoff dude, the guy who could only hit when we got to game 163 against the Cubs and the playoffs. Orlando Arcia, 236 average on the season. Travis Shaw, 241. Ryan Braun came in at a 254 average for Brawny, Kane at 308, and Christian Yelich at that 326 average. Looking at the bench for the Brewers in that year, Eric Thames, 219. Hernan Perez, a 253 average for Hernan. Santana, 265. And Mike Moustakas, a huge ad for the Brewers, 256. A guy that the Brewers shouldn't have had in that season because he didn't turn out to be much for the Brewers. Jonathan Schoop had a 202 average. I remember that year like it was yesterday, sitting there at the trade deadline, and it got past the 4 o'clock deadline, and I was like, son of a, the Brewers didn't make a move. And then all of a sudden, it says the Brewers and the Orioles have struck a deal. And I was like, oh man, we're getting Manny Machado. We're getting that dude. Manny Machado in that season, solid bat. This was before he tried to break Jesus Aguilar's ankle. I mean, I was still, if he would have came to Milwaukee that year, I wouldn't have hated the guy. But all of a sudden, they say Jonathan Schoop. And I was like, okay, he's got potential. He's a good bat. He's got a decent glove. He could fill this void that we need. Didn't turn out to be that for the Brewers. Did have 4 home runs, 21 RBIs in that season. Did come up with a big home run against Madison Bumgarner there after he hit Braun. No, Giant fans will say not on purpose, but we all knew it was on purpose. But Jonathan Schoop came up with a big home run in that spot. But that season, Schoop did not pan out for the Brewers very, very well. And also adding a guy in that season like Curtis Granderson. I thought Curtis Granderson was a solid add for the Brewers. He was a veteran outfielder, not a ton of um, at bats for him for the Brewers, 41 at bats in 54 plate appearances, 19 games. So he didn't play a lot of games for him, but he was a solid veteran ad, I thought, in that season. 220 average, didn't hit over the top, but I would take Curtis Granderson again if I'm the Brewers in that situation. I thought he was a solid ad in that year. Looking at the Brewers team average that season, 252 they hit overall in that year, 7 out of 15 NL teams in that year. Looking over here, team home runs, they were actually ranked third at 218 on the season. This is where they started to become the boppers. This is where they completely, or not completely, but relied on the home run ball a lot. Looking at team hits, they were actually ranked sixth in the league there. RBIs on the season, 711, and they actually stole 124 bases. Looking at stolen bases, Kane stole 30 bases, Christian Yelich stole 22, Jonathan Villar with 14 on the season there, Hernan Perez with 11. So it was a pretty spread out evenly. We're going to steal bases on your team right there. Looking at the rotation for the Brewers, and this is where they kind of struggled, was with that rotation. Looking at guys like Yoelis Chacin, struggled a little bit in the playoffs, was a solid ad for the Brewers though that season. 3.50 ERA on the year, 15-8. Had a lot of help from the offense. The offense was explosive that year. Looking at other guys like Chase Anderson, 3.93 ERA. Junior Guerra struggled that year for him, 4.09 ERA. Brent Suter, before he got sent out to the bullpen, 4.44 ERA. Wade Miley was the huge ad for the Brewers in that season, sitting at a 2.57 ERA for Wade. 80 innings pitched. He gave up 23 earned runs on that year, but that ERA at 2.57, he was a solid ad for the Brewers, 50 strikeouts. I will never understand when Craig Counsell pulled him out after one batter there in that NLCS. Looking at other pitchers for the Brewers, in the bullpen specifically, that's when they had the three-headed monster out there. Jeremy Jeffress, Josh Hader, and Corey Knebel. Knebel, 3.58 ERA, Josh Hader, 2.43 ERA, and Jeremy Jeffress, 1.29 ERA. They had three guys down there that they could go to in any situation, and they felt comfortable. That's what I feel like the Brewers lack in 23, is that comfortable. We can go to anybody here in the 8th or 9th and be A-okay. We could go to Hader in the 8th, and we can go to Knebel in the 9th, or Jeffress in the 9th, and feel fine in this situation. Other pitchers that year, Taylor Williams, 4.25 ERA, struggled with the Brewers, didn't get in very much. And then looking at guys like Dan Jennings, but also the emergence of guys like Brandon Woodruff and Corbin Burns in that year, sitting at that 3.61 ERA for Brandon Woodruff, and Burns out of the bullpen there was solid. A 2.61 ERA for Burns. Also, the addition of Gio Gonzalez in that year was huge for the Brewers, sitting at that 2.13 ERA for Gio Gonzalez. 5 starts for him, 25 innings, 14 hits given up in total, 22 strikeouts. Gio Gonzalez, another big ad for the Brewers there in that starting rotation. Other guys that year, Jorge Lopez was on that team. Soria was also in there. He had some solid outings for the Brewers, struggled a little bit, but had some solid outings. Looking down the line here just to see if there's any guys I missed on that team there in the bullpen. That was about it. We had big Matt Elbers was out there. He did not last into the postseason for the Brewers. 7.34 ERA on the season in 34 games. He was a quick out when it came to postseason baseball. Looking at rankings, though, team ERA, they're ranked 4th in the NL there out of 15 teams. Hit-wise, they were 2nd out of all pitchers. Their innings pitched 5th. Looking at strikeouts, they were ranked 5th in the league. So pitching becomes more of a factor. As we see with the Brewers, we go year by year. Pitching starts to pick it up a little bit for the Brewers. Looking over into 2019 now, came in at 89-73, finished 2nd in the Central, lost in the Wild Card Series to the Nationals. Everybody remembers what happened to Trent Grisham out there in the outfield. That year, the addition of Yasmani Grandal 246 batting average for Yasmani. But the team batting average starts to slump here for this Brewers team year by year. Keston Hiura was a big emergence in this season, 303 average for him. Eric Thames was tagged as the first baseman, 247 batting average for Thames. Arcia saw that average stay relatively the same, 223. Ryan Braun uptick there, 285. Lorenzo Cain dropped down to 260, and Christian Yelich hit 329 before breaking that kneecap. Looking at other notables for the Brewers in that season, on the bench, you had guys like Ben Gamel, Travis Shaw was in there too. He started to struggle. Jesus Aguilar struggled for the Brewers in this season. Hernan Perez, your bench guy. Trent Grisham, 231 average. And Manny Pena with that 228 average for Manny in this season. Looking at the starters, well, team batting average in that season actually dropped down to ninth in the league, 246. So you look at how the batting starts to drop off, but the pitching starts to pick it up for this Brewers team. Looking at the starting rotation for that year, you had guys like Zach Davies, Chase Anderson, Brandon Woodruff, Adrian Hauser, Yolis Chacin, and Gio Gonzalez in that season there. Zach Davies actually led the way in ERA, a 3.55 ERA. Notables in that season, Brandon Woodruff in that first season there in the rotation, 3.62 ERA for Brandon Woodruff. Looking at the bullpen there, Knebel starts to become a non-factor in there. And then we jump into other guys like Josh Hader, first season as a full-time closer there, 37 saves, 2.62 ERA. Other guys in the bullpen there, Jeremy Jeffress, 5.02 ERA, 48 games. He had a save for the Brewers there. Alex Claudio was in that bullpen. Junior Guerra, Matt Elbers was in there. Other guys out there in the pen for the Brewers, guys like Brent Suter, Jacob Barnes, Jimmy Nelson was there back for a little bit there. Corbin Burns actually pitched in 32 games, only had 4 starts in 2019. Freddie Peralta, 39 games, 8 starts for the Brewers. So we start to see some of the emergence of guys like Brandon Woodruff, guys like not Jimmy Nelson, old news. Corbin Burns, Freddie Peralta starting to make their way into the everyday roles with the Brewers. And in that season, we were introduced to our today's closer, Devin Williams. In that season, he had 13 games pitched and a 3.95 ERA for the Brewers. They actually ranked 10th in ERA in that season, second in saves with 50. Additions like Drew Pomeranz were huge in that season, a 2.93 ERA for Pomeranz on the season there. But other than that, that is about it for that 2019 team. We're going to jump all the way up into 2020 because the Brewers, that was a COVID year. We're not going to talk about it for long because I'm going to tell you this, the averages sucked. Pitching was 29 and 31, just snuck in, finished 4th in the NL Central. Lost in the wild card series to the Dodgers in that season. Looking at team batting average, it was pitiful. The leader in batting average for that season was actually Orlando Arcia, 260 average. Other than that, you look down here, Omar Narvaez, 176. Justin Smoke was on that team, 186 for them. Daniel Vogelbach was the big guy on that lineup, 328 hitter. Other than that, Ben Gamel, 237. Ryan Braun, 233. Christian Yelich, 205 for this Brewers team. That was the beginning of the struggle that I like to say for the Brewers offense with team batting average. We had a guy like Jed Jerko on that team there. 248 on the season there, 117 at-bats, 29 hits, 19 runs, 9 home runs. Looking at the starting rotation for the Brewers in that year, Brandon Woodruff was top of the rotation, 3.05 ERA, 13 starts for him. Corbin Burns, 2.11 ERA, 9 starts on the season. Solid from Burns and Woodruff. This is where we start to see him in there. Also a guy like Adrian Hauser, 5.30 ERA, and this is where we got introduced to 2 guys named Brett Anderson and Josh Lindblom, who we had a lot of hope for, but struggled for us. In the bullpen for the Brewers in that season, Josh Hader was our closer, 3.79 ERA on the season, 13 saves. Brent Suter was also out in the bullpen, 3.13 ERA. Devin Williams was the highlight of the season that year for the Brewers in the bullpen. 0.33 ERA, 22 games. This is where we start to see why Devin Williams was why we were so easy the Brewers were of getting rid of Josh Hader was because of the emergence of Devin Williams. They weren't worried about losing a guy like Josh Hader to trade. Other than that, in that season, Drew Rasmussen was up for a little bit there for the Brewers, 2.87. JP Fireheisen, 4.79. Justin Topa actually had a 2.35 ERA in that season. All guys that Brewers had will end up trading in this next season for a guy added into this lineup that added a spark in 2021 for the Brewers. Team ERA in that season, we were ranked 6th in the NL. Strikeouts ranked 2nd. So the Brewers pitching was okay in that year, but team batting average, team hitting in general was what killed the Brewers that year. Looking over into 2021 for the Brewers, finished at 95-67, finished first in the NL Central, lost in the division series to the Braves, just got completely mollywopped by the Braves there in that series. Looking at emergence from guys like Omar Narvaez, 267 hitter that year. Colton Wong, 272. Willie Adames was that ad, 285 hitter for the Brewers in that season. Luis Urias, 249. Christian Yelich, this is where his struggle was, 248 hitter. And Avi Garcia, 262. Jackie Bradley Jr. was the hope and prayer of that year, 163 hitter. Other than that, looking down, Lorenzo Cain, 257 hitter for the Brewers that year. Jace Peterson, 247 hitter. Tyrone Taylor, 247 hitter in that season. This is where we start to see him drop. But the additions of a guy like Eduardo Escobar was huge for the Brewers that season. He actually hit for the Brewers 268, 6 home runs, 25 RBIs. He helped the Brewers get that NL Central crown along with the addition of Willie Adames that year. Looking at team pitching that year, this is where the rotation starts to get familiar with this Brewers team. Brandon Woodruff sitting in that top spot there. He came in with a 2.56 ERA. Corbin Burns, 2.43. Freddie Peralta, 2.81. Adrian Hauser, 3.22. And Eric Lauer, 3.19. Brett Anderson was in there too, a 4.22 ERA for him. Looking at the bullpen, this is where you had the solid setup of Devin Williams to Josh Hader. Hader had a 1.23 ERA. Devin Williams a 2.50. Hunter Strickland on that team, a 1.73 ERA on that season. And the emergence of Jake Cousins was a huge add to that Brewers team. I compare him in that season to adding Abner Uribe to the 2023 season for the Brewers. I think it's the same concept. Both had that great velocity, great arm, lively arm, a lot of movement. That's what you're getting with adding Abner Uribe is a guy like Jake Cousins. Other than that, looking at team ERA that year, they were ranked 3rd in team ERA. In saves, they were ranked 4th. Home runs given up 5th. Strikeouts, they were ranked number 1 overall on the season there. So they were solid in that department there on the pitching. Pitching was the dominant force for the Brewers in this season. Hitting is what struggled for the Brewers, especially going up against the Braves. They're in the playoffs. Next, we are going to jump. We got past years past. So we are going to jump into the 2023 Brewers and just look at where they are at right now. Compare them to years past. Right now, sitting at first in the NL Central, 100% chance to make the postseason right now, 88-68. Almost a lock to win the NL Central. So we're going to say NL Central winners. Looking at the lineup for the Brewers, William Contreras sitting at that 288 average. Rowdy Tellez is a guy in this lineup occasionally, 215. This is where we start to see a drop off of Rowdy. Bryce Terang, 221. Willie Adames, 213. Brian Anderson, 222. Yelich, 276. Looking at guys like Tyrone Taylor, 233. Andrew Monasterio, 263. Caratini coming in at 251. Sal Frelick, 263. Carlos Santana, 241. Mark Canha, 296 hitter with the Brewers. Blake Perkins at 222. And Josh Donaldson at 205. You compare that lineup to a successful lineup, let's just say back in 2018. Everybody remembers 2018 a little bit better than years past. So we look at the lineup there. Just comparing catcher-wise, we're better today. Looking at first base-wise, Jesus Aguilar in that season, hard to beat. So we're going to give it to Jesus in that season. Second base, Terang versus Jonathan VR. Glove-wise, VR didn't have a bad glove, but I'm going to take Terang glove-wise, but I'm taking VR at the plate in that season, 261 hitter there in those 257 at-bats on that season. A little bit short for him. But shortstop-wise, I think I'm going with Orlando Arcia in 2018. He's sitting at a 236 average. Looking at third base for comparison, Travis Shaw. Or in that season, Mike Moustakas. Both Mike Moustakas, 256 hitter, Travis Shaw, 241. I'm taking them both over Josh Donaldson. Now, if you bring Andrew Monasterio into the fold, he's more of a utility because he's playing second base, third base, mainly third. I take Monasterio over Travis Shaw. I don't know about Mike Moustakas. We didn't get Mike Moustakas for a full season that year in 2018. It might change my mind if we had him for a full season. But I would say the Brewers' needs right now is contact. Mike Moustakas was more for my thump. So I'm going with Andrew Monasterio there in there. Looking at left field, Ryan Braun, 254 hitter. Do you have Mark Canha out there, or do you have Tyrone Taylor? Because if I'm comparing the two, I'm going to take Braun over Tyrone Taylor in that sense. If I'm comparing left field to, say, Mark Canha, that gets a little bit dicey for me, but I'm going to take Mark Canha for as hot as he's hitting right now. I love Ryan Braun, but I would take Mark Canha. Lorenzo Cain, 308 average for Cain that season, center field. Between him and Frelick, that kills me because I'm a big Sal Frelick fan, but he's a rookie compared to Lorenzo. But I'm taking Lorenzo Cain in that aspect, and then Christian Yelich versus himself or Tyrone Taylor, 326 hitter in 2018. It's got to be Christian Yelich in there. But that's where I'm looking at the difference between year by year is where we've led to getting to today, where team batting average has dropped a lot. And that has to do with pitchers are throwing harder. There's a lot more break. You have to deal with a lot more pitches. And the game has changed. The rules have changed for these hitters up there. So in that aspect, yes, it's a little bit tougher today than it was back then. It is tougher. But team batting average has dropped over the years. Looking at team batting average for this season, they are actually ranked 12th out of 15 teams at a 240 average on the season so far. So that's where I'm kind of looking towards year by year, the difference of what the Brewers have done and what they have at the plate heading towards the playoffs or what they had throughout the season. And this 2023 team doesn't stack up nicely with the 2018 team. I thought the 2018 team was solid. 2011 was pretty darn good. 1982, you can't beat. I mean, you had Cecil, you had Robin Yount, you had Paul Molitor. I mean, for heaven's sake, you had guys like Jim Gantner was in there hitting 295 for you that year. You had guys like Ted Simmons hitting 269. Even a guy like Roy Howell coming in at 260. You had some solid averages across there. And then you had Robin Yount hitting 331 and Cecil hitting 3. I mean, it's hard to beat that kind of averages there. But the Brewers today, the struggle is putting the ball in play, making it happen. And that's where, looking back at those other teams versus today, that's what the difference what I was shooting for there is just see the difference year by year of what this team has progressed and what they're lacking in versus one era to another, what the difference is. And that is hitting has started to drop off. The Brewers used to be one of those organizations with some of the best hitters. And now we have the scrap hitters, the guys who, well, I wouldn't go as far as that. The rookies, can't really blame them. They're rookies yet. But we go for the bottom guys, like signing a guy like, let's just say Luke Voigt, or even signing a guy like Darren Ruff, Yame Jones. I mean, he was a last-minute ad. But guys like that where we're kind of just hoping and praying they get back to what they were, and they don't. And that's where the Brewers in the past have stayed away from, and now they're getting into this little mode where that's what they want to add to this team. We stuck with Joey Wiemer for too long. We stuck with Jesse Winker for too long. We have other viable bats that have sat down on the bench or in AAA that we haven't given the shots because we've had guys like that in the lineup. You look at our pitching compared to the past, team ERA first in team ERA so far. Looking at strikeouts, they're ranked 5th in all of the league. Innings pitched ranked 3rd. This team stacks up. Pitching is the name of the game versus the past. It was the bats were what got them there. This year and the last couple years, it's been pitching that is getting them where they got to go. The bats have slowly dropped off. The Brewers 2023 season will rely on the bats to see what this page will tell me come the end of the year here. What happened to the Milwaukee Brewers? Can the bats come alive in the playoffs and help out the pitching, which, as we can see, has been solid? Can the bats figure it out to complement the pitching heading into the playoffs here? But that is what I have for today. I just wanted to cover year by year. I hope you guys enjoyed it. I really did enjoy it, seeing year by year how the Brewers have progressed and what the difference is between that 1981, 1982 team all the way up through 2008, 2011, 2018, 2019, all the way to 2023. Just seeing what the Brewers have done year by year to get where they are today. Luckily, I didn't have to cover more than that's getting close to an hour, but I didn't have to cover more than an hour because the Brewers haven't made it to the playoffs that often. It sucks to say as a Brewer fan, but for podcast purposes, it helps me out. I don't have to shoot so long. But with that, it has been awesome talking with you guys today. Like I said, I hope you guys enjoyed it. I really did enjoy going through the history of the Brewers in the playoffs and just are in the postseason seasons and just seeing what was a part of it and what made that team solid and what made that team postseason competitor. But with that, it has been awesome talking to you guys today. I hope you guys are tuning in to the Brewers tonight, hopefully bringing home the NL Central Division title tonight. We'd love to see it here from the Brewers. But with that, this has been Wisconsin Sports on the Go with Trade. Thank you guys for listening. It's been awesome. Deuces, Brew Crew.